Okay, so are you ready for this? We're diving into a story that you sent us. And it's a creepy one, I'll tell you that. It's all about a family, a new baby, and a baby monitor that becomes a whole lot more than just a way to hear your kid cry. So, we've got this young couple, Claire and Mark. They just moved into their dream home in the suburbs, you know. The kind of place that seems picture perfect. They have their 3-month-old baby Liam. Everything seems peaceful. Until they start using the baby monitor.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but this is where I start to get a little nervous. It's like, you're in the safe, quiet neighborhood. But even something as ordinary as a baby monitor can become unsettling.
It's interesting how this story plays on our fears about technology.
Yeah.
Like, we're surrounded by these devices that we rely on completely, and yet there's always that nagging feeling, isn't there? What if they're not as safe as we think? What if they can be turned against us?
Exactly. And that's exactly what starts happening to Claire and Mark. At first, it's just some static on the monitor, the usual kind of interference you might expect. But then it starts to change. They begin to hear whispers, like faint voices coming through the monitor, saying things like, "Come closer, come to me." You know that feeling you get when you can't quite make something out, but you know it's not right? That's what starts happening here. It's like the story's already getting under your skin, even in these early stages.
Yeah, that sense of ambiguity is a classic horror technique. It makes you question your own perceptions, makes you wonder if you're imagining things, and that uncertainty can be more unsettling than any outright scare.
Absolutely. And of course, things don't stay ambiguous for long. The voice on the monitor starts to get louder, more insistent, and then they hear it, "He's mine, he's always been mine." That line is just bone-chilling.
Yeah, it's like the story's reaching back into like ancient folklore here, touching on those primal fears of possession, and the idea that something unseen can lay claim to what we hold dear.
It's interesting you say that, because that line really does feel like it has this deep, unsettling history behind it. It's not just a threat, it's a declaration of ownership.
Huh.
And that makes it even more terrifying, don't you think?
I think it speaks to a very specific kind of fear. The fear of losing control, of something being taken from you that you can't possibly protect. And in this case, it's a parent's worst nightmare, something threatening their child.
Okay, so we've got this voice on the baby monitor, and it's getting progressively creepier. But then the story takes another turn. They start to hear more than just voices. They hear a child's giggle and footsteps coming through the monitor. I mean, can you imagine? You're lying in bed, trying to sleep, and you hear that coming from your baby's room.
The addition of those sounds is brilliant. It takes the threat from the abstract, a disembodied voice, and makes it physical. Something that's moving around in the room with the baby. It plays on that primal fear of the unseen, something that humans have grappled with for centuries.
And of course, it just keeps escalating from there. The next night, Claire actually sees it, whatever it is. She runs into Liam's room, and Liam is just staring at something across the room, totally captivated. And there by the window is a shadowy figure of a child, just standing there, watching them.
The visual element is so important here. Up until this point, everything has been auditory, leaving some room for doubt. But now there's no denying it. Claire has seen it with her own eyes. The threat is real, and it's tangible.
And you know what gets me? Liam the baby is totally unfazed. He's just lying there looking at this shadowy figure, and like it's the most natural thing in the world.
But that detail always sends shivers down my spine. It's like the story knows exactly how to tap into our deepest fears. And it adds another layer to the mystery. What is the connection between Liam and this entity? Why isn't he afraid?
It makes you think maybe Liam isn't in danger from the entity, but is instead the object of its obsession. That line, "He's mine, he's always been mine," takes on a whole new meaning when you think about it that way.
That phrase makes me think about the idea of generational curses. How something from the past can reach out and touch the present. It suggests a claim that goes beyond this one night, this one house. And that's a truly unsettling thought.
I mean, at this point, I think anyone would be running for the hills. And that's exactly what Claire and Mark do. They grab Liam, get out of the house, and head straight for a hotel. They're trying to put some distance between themselves and whatever is in that house, but
Well, you know how these stories go. It doesn't end there.
no, it doesn't. And this is where the story really starts to mess with your head. They're driving away, trying to calm down. And Claire decides to turn the baby monitor back on. Maybe she wants to make sure Liam's okay. Maybe it's just a desperate attempt to regain some sense of control. Either way, it's a decision that backfires in the worst possible way.
Because as soon as she turns that monitor on, the voice comes back.
Yeah.
Clear as day. It says, "Don't think you can keep him from me? He's mine. He's always been mine. I swear I get chills just thinking about it." That voice is like the embodiment of pure obsession, isn't it? It refuses to be ignored, refuses to be silenced. And that repetition of the phrase, "He's mine, he's always been mine," it's like a hammer blow, driving home the point that this entity is not going to give up.
It's almost like the voice is taunting them, saying, "You can run, but you can't hide." And then after that chilling message, silence. The monitor goes quiet. No more static, no more whispers, no more giggling, just nothing. What do you make of that sudden silence?
Sometimes silence can be more terrifying than any sound, don't you think? It's like the calm before the storm, the moment of quiet anticipation before something truly awful happens. In this case, it leaves us hanging, wondering what's coming next.
Did the family truly escape? Or is this just a temporary reprieve?
It's that uncertainty that really gets to me. We don't know what happened next, what this entity might do, or what its true intentions are. And that open ending, it just invites us to fill in the blanks with our own fears and imaginations. It's a classic horror technique, leaving the audience with more questions than answers. It allows the story to linger in the mind long after it's over, to seep into our subconscious and keep us looking over our shoulders.
So, let's put ourselves in Claire and Mark's shoes for a moment. If you were in their situation, what would you do? Would you have stayed in that house, tried to fight back against this unknown force, or would you have run just like they did?
That's a tough question. And I think it depends on your own personal beliefs and fears. Some people might feel compelled to confront the unknown, to try to understand it or even banish it. Others might be driven by a pure instinct for self-preservation, to protect themselves and their loved ones at all costs.
For me, I think I'd be in the get out of there camp. But even then, would you ever truly feel safe, knowing that this entity, this voice, might still be out there somewhere waiting?
That's the true horror of this story, isn't it? The sense that there are things in this world that we can't control, forces beyond our comprehension that might be lurking just out of sight, and that no matter how safe and secure we try to make our lives, there's always a chance that something might come along and shatter that illusion.
You know what's funny? We started this deep dive talking about a baby monitor, something so ordinary, so everyday. But this story has taken us to some pretty dark places. It's made us think about our relationship with technology, the things we can't explain, and the fears that lie at the heart of being a parent.
It's a reminder that horror doesn't always have to be about monsters and gore. Sometimes the most unsettling stories are the ones that tap into those primal fears, the ones that whisper to us in the dark and make us question the very fabric of reality.
This story definitely does that. It takes something as simple as a baby monitor and turns it into a conduit for something sinister, something that we can't see or fully understand.
And that's what makes it so effective. It plays on our anxieties about the unknown, the things that lurk just beyond the edges of our perception. It reminds us that even in our modern world, with all our technology and scientific advancements, there are still mysteries that defy explanation.
Do you think that's why stories like this resonate so deeply with us? Because they acknowledge that there are things out there that we just can't control, no matter how hard we try.
I think there's a certain comfort in that. In a strange way, we live in a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, where we're expected to have answers to everything. But stories like this allow us to embrace the unknown, to acknowledge that there are forces at work that we may never fully comprehend.
Like a reminder that we're not always in control, that there are things bigger than ourselves out there, and that can be both terrifying
and strangely liberating.
Exactly. It allows us to tap into a sense of awe and wonder, to acknowledge the mysteries of the universe and our own place within it. So what does this all mean for us, for the listeners who are out there, maybe listening to this in the dark, with their own baby monitors humming in the background? What can we take away from this chilling tale?
Perhaps it's a reminder to be mindful of the technology we surround ourselves with, To remember that even the most mundane devices can be imbued with unexpected meaning. Or maybe it's simply a story to tell around the campfire. A way to share our fears and anxieties and connect with something larger than ourselves.
Whatever the interpretation, it's a story that stays with you. It makes you think twice about the shadows in the corner of your eye, the strange noises in the night, and the things that might be whispering to us when we least expect it.
So the next time you hear a creak in your house or static on your baby monitor, don't just dismiss it. Listen closely. You never know what stories might be trying to find their way to you.
And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the mysteries of the universe.
Ready for another plunge into the mysterious and maybe a little spooky?
Always up for a good mystery. Let's dive in.
This time, we're taking a deep dive into a listener's story about a woman named Ellie.
Okay, Ellie.
Yeah, and she inherits this beautiful, old Victorian house. You know, the kind you see in movies.
So picture this. Creaky floorboards, narrow twisting hallways, like something out of a classic ghost story.
Exactly. And the source material really emphasizes that atmosphere. It's like stepping back in time to the early 1900s.
Right, a time capsule.
And that just makes the whole thing even creepier because Ellie quickly discovers that she's not alone. There's this presence, there's something else in the house with her.
Classic haunted house vibes. So how does this presence manifest itself?
Well, it starts subtly. At first, she hears these faint footsteps at night, almost unnoticeable.
Oh, I hate that. Makes you question your sanity, right? Is it the house settling? Is it my imagination? Or is it something else?
Exactly. But in Ellie's case, the footsteps become harder to ignore. They get louder, slower, more deliberate each night.
Oh, that sends chills down my spine. It's like whatever it is, it's getting bolder, letting her know it's there.
And the source emphasizes this one detail. The footsteps always occur around 3 a.m.
3 a.m. That's prime spooky time. You know, like the witching hour.
Totally. Adds to the mystery and the tension, right?
Yeah.
So Ellie decides she has to do something. She can't just hide under the covers every night.
I can't blame her. So what does she do? Call in the Ghostbusters?
Not quite. She decides to confront her fear head on. She waits by her bedroom door, hoping to catch a glimpse of her nightly visitor.
Oh, brave. I don't know if I could do that. So what does she see?
Not a full-blown ghost, thankfully, but a shadowy, human-shaped figure moving down the hallway.
That's even creepier somehow. Your mind starts racing, filling in the blanks.
Absolutely. And the source doesn't just describe what Ellie sees, but what she feels. It talks about this heavy, unsettling presence, like a wave of dread washing over her.
It's like the feeling you get when you know someone's watching you, even if you can't see them. Super unsettling.
And that feeling of dread just intensifies when Ellie discovers her grandmother's old journal hidden away in the house.
Ooh, a journal. Those are always full of secrets. What's in it?
Well, Ellie finds an entry describing the same 3 a.m. footsteps. But here's the thing. The entry is from decades earlier.
Whoa. So it's not just a random ghost. It's been haunting the family for generations. That's like inheriting a family curse.
It really is. Now, most people would probably pack their bags and run at this point.
Yeah.
But not Ellie. She decides to try and capture evidence of the ghost.
Okay, that's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. How does she try to do that?
She sets up a camera in the hallway, hoping to catch the ghost on film.
A camera, huh? Bringing a bit of modern technology into this old school haunting. I like it.
Yeah, and it works. The camera captures the shadowy figure moving down the hallway, just as Ellie described.
So there's proof. It's not just Ellie's imagination. But wait, there's more, right? You mentioned something really chilling in the intro.
Oh, there's definitely more. This time, the shadow does something even more unsettling. It speaks.
Speaks. Okay, now I am officially freaked out. What does it say?
The shadow says, and I quote, "I belong here. This was my home, long before it was yours."
Whoa. That's possessive. It's not just a haunting, it's like a turf war. This spirit is claiming the house as its own and basically telling Ellie she's just a guest.
Exactly. And that statement really sets the stage for the rest of Ellie's story. It raises so many questions. Who is this spirit? Why are they so attached to the house? And what do they want from Ellie?
It also makes you think about what it means to truly belong somewhere. Can a house hold on to spirits even after death?
Big questions, and ones that Ellie is forced to grapple with. But there's another layer to this story. Even though she's terrified, Ellie can't bring herself to leave the house.
Wait, she can't leave. It's like something's holding her there. It's giving me Hotel California vibes. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
Exactly. It's like the house, or maybe the spirit itself, has some inexplicable hold on her. And that leads us to the next part of Ellie's journey. Her eventual acceptance of the visitor.
Acceptance. Oh, this I have to hear. So let's pause here for a moment and we'll come back to that in just a bit.
Sounds good.
Imagine inheriting a house steeped in family history, and then you find out it comes with a permanent resident of the ghostly kind.
Yeah. It's like, what do you do with that, right? The source makes it clear that Ellie tries to leave, even packs her bags, but she's drawn back. It's like she's tethered to the house, like it won't let her go.
It's like that feeling of being rooted, connected to a place, even when logic tells you to run. This is where the source really gets into Ellie's head, the psychological impact of it all. It's not just the fear anymore. It's this pull towards something she can't explain, something both unsettling and strangely compelling.
Right, like this internal tug of war. She wants safety, normalcy, but there's this other force at play.
Exactly. And this leads her to a decision that I find incredibly interesting. She chooses to accept the visitor.
Acceptance. Okay, I get wanting to make peace with things, but accepting a ghost who likes to wander the halls at 3 a.m.
It's more than just making peace. It's about acknowledging that you can't change the past. This house, this history, it's all part of her inheritance. And maybe she sees the visitor, the haunting, as part of that legacy too.
So she's embracing the whole package, spooky history and all. That's some serious courage, I gotta say.
Think about it this way. This house has been in her family for generations. There's a connection there that runs deeper than fear, a sense of responsibility maybe.
That's interesting. It's like she's choosing to honor the past, even the parts that scare her.
Right. It's about facing those uncomfortable truths, the things we can't change, and finding a way to live with them.
It really makes you think about how we all deal with those shadows, the things we inherit from our families, the good and the bad. But does Ellie ever find out who the visitor is? Like, what's their story?
This is where the source, in my opinion, makes a brilliant choice. It leaves those questions unanswered.
Really?
Yeah. We know the spirit feels a sense of belonging, even ownership of the house. But the specifics, their life, their death, their connection to Ellie's family, it's all a mystery.
So we're left to fill in the blanks ourselves.
Exactly. It's like the source is inviting us to be detectives, piece together the clues, draw our own conclusions, and that's what makes it so compelling. It sparks curiosity, it gets people talking, and it makes you think about these bigger questions. Our relationship to the past, to the places we call home, and to the unseen forces that might be at play in our lives.
Okay, so the key takeaway here is that Ellie's story isn't just about a creepy haunting. It's about recognizing the complexity of inheritance, the weight of family history, the good, the bad, and the unexplained.
That's a great way to put it. It's about confronting those things, finding a way to coexist with them, and realizing that some mysteries are meant to stay unsolved.
So what happens next for Ellie? What does this acceptance look like in her daily life?
Well, that's the beauty of it. We're left to imagine how she navigates life with this, let's call him a spectral roommate. Does she ever get used to those 3 a.m. footsteps? Does the fear fade, or does she just learn to live with it?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, it's one thing to say you accept it, but actually living with it day in and day out.
That's where the source, I think, is really smart. It doesn't tie everything up in a neat little bow. It leaves us hanging, wondering how Ellie actually manages. Does she try to communicate with the spirit again, find out more about who they were? Or does she just, try to ignore it and get on with her life? We don't know.
So it's kind of up to us to imagine what happens next.
Exactly. It's like the source is throwing the question back at us. What would you do?
Well, I know I'd be hitting the history books, trying to find out everything I could about the house, the previous occupants, anything to shed light on this visitor.
Yeah, some people would dive right into the research, try to solve the mystery. Others might just accept it as part of the house's unique charm.
Right. Like, oh yeah, the house comes with a ghost. No big deal.
Exactly. It all comes down to your personal tolerance for the unexplained. I mean, if you grew up in a haunted house, maybe those creaky floorboards and shadowy figures would just seem normal to you.
It's all about perspective, right? Maybe for Ellie, those footsteps eventually become almost comforting, like a reminder of her family history, of all the generations who came before her.
That's a beautiful way to look at it. Maybe it's not about fear anymore, but about acknowledging the past, accepting that some things just can't be explained.
So if we zoom out and look at the big picture, what can we learn from Ellie's haunted inheritance?
I think it reminds us that every place has a story. Every house holds memories. And sometimes those memories linger in ways we don't fully understand.
Yeah. It's like when you visit a historical landmark, you can almost feel the presence of the people who were there before you.
Exactly. Ellie's story encourages us to pay attention to those subtle signs, to appreciate the richness of history that surrounds us, even in the most unexpected places.
So the next time you hear a creak in an old house, or feel a sudden chill, don't just brush it off. Maybe it's a whisper from the past, reminding you that you're part of something bigger, a story that stretches back generations.
That's a powerful thought to end on.
It really is. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Anytime. Until next time, keep exploring. Welcome to another deep dive. We're going to unpack a story today that's as chilling as it is thought-provoking. It all revolves around a vintage radio, one of those beauties from the 1940s with the walnut wood and those big crackling knobs, you know the kind, that just screams ghost stories as soon as you look at it. This one, specifically, was tucked away in a dusty corner of an antique shop, just waiting for its story to be unearthed.
Objects like that are practically time capsules, aren't they? Each scratch, each faded dial, whispers tales of a past life. It's no wonder they hold such a strange allure for us.
Totally. And that's precisely what drew our main character, Oliver, to this particular radio. He wasn't even on the hunt for vintage electronics, but something about it called to him, like a whisper from across the decades, almost as if it wanted to be found at first. He just placed it in his study, a dimly lit room that, honestly, already had a slightly eerie vibe. For a few days, the radio sat there silently, a cool piece of decor with a hint of mystery. But on the fourth night, things took a turn. That would make even the most hardened skeptic raise an eyebrow.
Ah, yes. The fourth night. That's where the veil between the ordinary and the extraordinary begins to thin. Tell me, what happened?
Picture this. It's past midnight. The only light in the room is the faint glow from a street lamp outside. Oliver's dozed off in his chair, and suddenly, crackle. The radio bursts to life, not just static, mind you, but the distinct sound of a voice. Now here's the kicker. The radio wasn't even plugged in.
That's a detail. That certainly piques one's curiosity. It immediately raises questions about the nature of energy, about the possibility of residual imprints lingering within objects. Could it be that certain events, particularly traumatic ones, leave behind an echo, an energy signature that can be detected under the right circumstances?
That's what makes this story so captivating. It's like, on the one hand, your rational brain is screaming short circuit, but on the other hand, there's this primal part of you that can't help but lean in and whisper, what if?
Absolutely. It's those what-if moments that truly ignite our imagination, that remind us that there might be more to this world than meets the eye.
So, there's Oliver, staring at this unplugged radio that's suddenly serenading him with a ghostly voice. Naturally, he's terrified, but as he listens closer, he realizes it's the voice of a woman, faint and distorted by static, but clearly pleading for help. She keeps repeating that she's trapped, that she can't get out. Can you imagine hearing that in the dead of night?
It certainly chills the spine, doesn't it? It speaks to our deepest fears, the fear of the unknown, the fear of being trapped and helpless. What's fascinating here is the emotional impact the voice has on Oliver. He's initially overcome with fear, but then something shifts. There's a sense of responsibility. That begins to take root.
Exactly. It's like a primal instinct kicks in. That urge to help someone in distress, even if that someone is speaking to him. Through a supposedly inert piece of antique technology, Oliver tries talking back to the voice, asking who's there. But all he gets in response is more static. Then, suddenly, the voice cuts through the noise again, this time a bit clearer. She begs for help, for someone to find her, and then she whispers a name. Lydia.
Lydia. It's such a simple word, yet in this context, it's imbued with so much weight. This is where we start to see the threads of the past, weaving their way into the present. That name acts as a trigger, a spark that ignites a forgotten memory in Oliver's mind.
It's as if that name unlocks a door to a hidden chamber in his memory. And as Lydia continues speaking, it becomes clear that this connection runs deeper than just a familiar name. In a voice trembling with fear and desperation, Lydia describes a car accident, a torrential downpour, and then darkness. She remembers being trapped, disoriented, calling out for help, but her voice swallowed by the storm.
It's a story that echoes with tragedy, a narrative that resonates with our innate fear of being lost and alone. But what's particularly intriguing here is how it intersects with Oliver's own memories. You mentioned that the name Lydia sounded familiar to him.
It did. And as Lydia recounted her tale, Oliver's mind raced back to an old newspaper article he'd read years ago. It detailed a chilling unsolved case, a young woman named Lydia who vanished decades ago. After a car accident on a stormy night, her car was found wrecked, but her body was never recovered. Now talk about a coincidence, right?
Perhaps something more. Perhaps a convergence of energies, a ripple in the fabric of time. That allowed these two seemingly disparate events to intersect. It begs the question, is it truly coincidence? Or are there unseen forces at play, orchestrating these encounters in ways we can't yet comprehend?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
it's a question that's gnawing at Oliver's mind. On one hand, he wants to dismiss it all as a bizarre prank, a figment of his imagination, fueled by sleep deprivation and that creepy antique radio. But on the other hand, Lydia's voice felt so real, so desperate, and the details of her story, the car accident, the storm, all aligned with the newspaper article he remembered.
This internal struggle is a common thread in these types of narratives, isn't it? The battle between logic and intuition, the desire for a rational explanation versus the undeniable pull of the unexplainable. What do you think was going through Oliver's mind at that moment?
I think he was caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Terror, definitely, but also confusion, a sense of disbelief, and
Sure.
maybe even a flicker of hope. Could this really be Lydia reaching out from beyond the grave? Or was his mind playing tricks on him?
That flicker of hope is crucial. It's what pushes us beyond our comfort zones, compels us to explore the unknown, even when it terrifies us. It's the driving force behind every great discovery, every paradigm shift in our understanding of the world.
So what did Oliver do next? Did he try to contact the authorities, report this bizarre experience? Or did he dive headfirst into the mystery?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. He did something that surprised even himself. He started digging. Not literally at first, of course. Oliver dove headfirst into research, scouring old newspaper archives, public records, anything that could shed more light on Lydia's disappearance. He became obsessed, driven by a mixture of morbid curiosity and a burgeoning sense of responsibility towards this voice from the past.
Wow, I can't even imagine what that must have been like, feeling this pull towards a mystery that's decades old, a mystery most people would dismiss as a cold case. What did he find during his research? Anything that corroborated Lydia's story?
Oh, absolutely. The more Oliver dug, the more convinced he became that he wasn't dealing with a hoax or a figment of his imagination. He uncovered court documents, witness testimonies, even weather reports from the night of Lydia's disappearance, all of which aligned perfectly with the fragmented details she'd shared through the radio. It was as if the past was reaching out, confirming its own existence, daring him to believe.
It's like something out of a detective novel, isn't it? Except, in this case, the clues are leading him down a path that's both terrifying and exhilarating. Did this research make him more determined to help Lydia, or did it start to freak him out even more?
It was a bit of both. actually. The deeper he went, the more he felt this strange connection to Lydia, this sense of empathy for her plight. It's as if by uncovering her story, he was giving her a voice, acknowledging her existence in a way that no one had done in decades.
That's so profound, the idea that he could be giving a voice to someone lost to time. Did he ever consider going to the police with his findings? Or was he too afraid they'd think he was crazy?
He wrestled with that, believe me. But how do you explain something like this to someone who hasn't experienced it firsthand? Imagine trying to convince a police officer that you're communicating with a missing person from the 1940s. Through an unplugged vintage radio, they'd probably recommend a good psychiatrist.
Yeah. I can see how that conversation wouldn't go too well. So what did he do? Did he just keep researching? Or did he take any more, shall we say, unconventional steps to connect with Lydia?
He did something quite remarkable, actually. Remember how I mentioned that the fourth night was when things began to shift? Well, it became a sort of ritual for Oliver. Every night, he'd sit in his study, in the same chair, next to that old radio, hoping for some sign, some message from Lydia. Some nights, he'd hear faint whispers, snippets of words lost in the static. Other nights, there was only silence. But he never gave up hope.
That's both incredibly eerie and incredibly touching. This image of him, night after night, sitting there in the dim light, waiting for a voice from the past. It's almost like he's holding a vigil, keeping her memory alive. But this ritual, this nightly connection, couldn't have lasted forever.
Right, you're right. As the weeks went by, Oliver felt this growing urge to do more than just listen. He needed to act, to somehow bridge the gap between them. So, he decided to visit the site of Lydia's car accident.
Wow, that's a bold move. So he takes a pilgrimage to this site? That, to him, is practically hallowed ground. What was it like? Did it feel different? Heavier somehow?
The sources describe it as a desolate stretch of road, shrouded in an almost oppressive silence. Trees twisted and gnarled with age line the roadside, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. You can practically feel the chill in the air as Oliver steps out of his car, the weight of history pressing down on him.
I'm getting chills just imagining it. It must have taken a lot of courage for him to go there, knowing the tragic events that unfolded in that very spot. What did he do once he arrived?
He stood there for a long moment, just absorbing the atmosphere, letting the silence seep into him. Then, almost involuntarily, he called out Lydia's name. It was a whisper at first, tentative, almost afraid of breaking the stillness. But then, emboldened by a surge of emotion, he called out again, louder this time, his voice echoing through the trees.
And then what? Did anything happen? Did he hear anything?
As the echo of his voice faded, a gust of wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves. And in that rustling, Oliver thought he heard a faint whisper, a sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It was like a sigh, a breath of air that carried with it a hint of acknowledgement.
Goosebumps, that's all I can say. Goosebumps. Did this whisper, this spectral acknowledgement, frighten him or spur him on?
He did both. He was terrified, yes, but also strangely exhilarated. It was as if Lydia was guiding him, leading him towards something. His eyes scanned the area, searching for any sign, any clue. And then he noticed something. A patch of earth near the base of a large oak tree, the soil disturbed, fresher than the surrounding ground.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. I knew there had to be more to this story than just ghostly whispers. What did he do? Did he start digging?
He did, driven by a mixture of intuition and a desperate hope. Oliver began to dig. He didn't have any tools, just his bare hands, scraping away at the earth, his fingers raw and bleeding. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the clearing. But he kept digging, driven by an almost feverish intensity. And then, his fingers brushed against something hard, something metallic.
Okay. I have to know. What did he find buried there under that old oak tree? Don't leave me hanging.
He pulled it from the earth, his heart pounding in his chest. It was a locket, tarnished and corroded with age, but still undeniably beautiful. He held it in his hand, feeling its weight, its coldness, and a wave of emotion washed over him. It was a tangible link to the past, to Lydia, a piece of her story brought to light after all these years.
I bet that was an incredibly powerful moment for him, holding that locket in his hands. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a symbol of everything he'd been through, everything he'd come to believe.
Absolutely. And as he held that locket, something extraordinary happened. The air around him seemed to shimmer, and Lydia's voice, clearer than he'd ever heard it before, echoed through the clearing.
Okay. I need a moment to catch my breath. Hearing a voice from beyond the grave through an old radio is one thing, but then discovering a locket buried at the scene of the accident, that's a whole other level of spine tingling. What did Lydia say? Was it a message for Oliver, a final goodbye?
It was a message of gratitude, a whisper of peace. She simply said, "Thank you." But in those two words, Oliver heard a lifetime of emotion, a release from decades of restless wandering.
Wow. I can only imagine the kind of weight lifted off Oliver's shoulders in that moment. It must have felt like he'd finally fulfilled his purpose, helping Lydia find peace after all those years. What happened next? Did she say anything else?
No, that was it. The whisper faded, the air stilled, and a profound sense of calm settled over the clearing. It was as if Lydia's spirit, finally acknowledged and remembered, had been set free.
It's a bittersweet ending, isn't it? Tragic, of course, considering the circumstances of her passing, but also beautiful in a way. She found peace, and Oliver found a sense of closure, a confirmation that his experience wasn't just a figment of his imagination.
Exactly, and that's what makes this story so compelling. It speaks to our innate human desire to connect, to find meaning in the face of loss and mystery. Oliver's journey, his willingness to believe in something beyond the realm of the ordinary, led him to a truth that had been buried for decades.
Did the radio ever come back to life? Or was that Lydia's final farewell?
From that day forward, the radio remained silent. It became a treasured memento, a reminder of the incredible connection Oliver shared with Lydia, a connection that transcended time and logic. He placed the locket beside the radio on his desk, a silent testament to their shared experience.
I can see him now. Years later, glancing at that locket and that old radio, remembering the woman whose voice echoed through the decades, the woman he helped find peace. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are there other Lydias out there? Other spirits lost and forgotten, waiting for someone to hear their whispers?
That's a question we all have to grapple with, isn't it? This story challenges us to confront our own beliefs, to consider the possibility that there might be more to this world than we can see or touch. It invites us to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts, to the whispers of the past, the echoes of lives lived and lost.
And perhaps, just perhaps, if we listen closely enough, we might find ourselves connecting with something truly extraordinary, something that redefines our understanding of what's possible.
Precisely, sometimes. The most incredible discoveries are the ones we least expect, the ones that find us when we're open to the whispers of the universe.